Great, so I want to welcome everyone to our second Technology Lunch and Learn for the 2018-2019 academic year. And today's presentation is called the SAMR Model for Technology Integration, integrating Adobe Spark and Instagram into the college classroom. And our presenters are Dr. Stacy Fields and Dr. Katie Schrott over here. So thankful that you all have agreed to present. And we look forward to what you have for us today. Thank you.
Okay, as Dr. Calkins said, we're talking about the SAMR model and how to integrate that into the college classroom, and also integrating the Adobe Spark and Instagram as well. So are any of you familiar with the SAMR model at all? Have you used that?
A little bit.
Okay.
You've taught me everything I know.
Absolutely. So at the end of today, what we're looking for, we want participants to be able to define the steps in the SAMR continuum, because the SAMR model does run in a continuum. We want you to be able to create your own Adobe Spark graphic. There's 3 parts to the Adobe Spark, so we're going to create our own graphic. And then Katie's going to talk about, we're going to experience reflecting on the SAMR model through social media-driven book assignments. Okay, each of you have your Nearpod going. Is it working for you? Okay. So the SAMR model, as I said at the beginning, it is by Dr. Puntanhara, and it is a model. It's very similar to Bloom's taxonomy, and we'll see how it links in with that in just a minute. But it's a model that runs on a continuum. You see at the bottom, you have the substitution at the very bottom, and then you run augmentation it comes next, then modification, and then redefinition. It's 2 parts to it. At the lower end, it is just simply, when you use it in your classroom, it's how to make technology a part of your classroom and how to switch out what you're doing. Instead of when we're thinking about making our assignments, it's instead of doing the assignments themselves, it's how to make the technology assignments move up the continuum. So you're substituting out what you're doing in the class with technology and how to redefine that and how to move it up the continuum, and how to make it better or redefine it or substitute it out some way. And then when you think about Bloom's, is it more creative? Are we analyzing? What are we doing with it? So we'll look at this a little more deeply. What you think about first when you're substituting, think about a cup of coffee. Do I have any coffee drinkers in the room? Woo. Okay. So when we look at the very lower end of that SAMR model, the very first is substitution. If you get a cup of coffee, yours at home, you're drinking your own cup of coffee, or you can go to Starbucks and get Starbucks coffee, right? It's the same thing, it's just in a different form. Your coffee mug at home or the Starbucks coffee. You've just swapped it out, it looks a little bit different. It's the same thing, it's just in a different mug, okay? So when we do substitution with the SAMR model, it's the same idea. So you think about, maybe you've done a log, or you've asked students to do some sort of, read an article and asked them to do, maybe even on Word, to do some sort of reading log. If we do a technology piece and we substitute it out, maybe we ask them to do a blog now. It's the same, it's just a little bit different. We've added that technology piece to it. It's just in a little bit of different shape or form. So SAMR, that substitution piece, it's the same, maybe it's just a little bit of a different format. And so when we think about this model, when you're thinking about how do I substitute something out, do I gain anything by adding this? Am I just doing it to be doing it? What am I teaching the students? What did my old assignment look like? What does my new assignment look like? What are you teaching? What does your class look like? So when you're doing it in the university classroom, because this model was meant for the elementary school class, or or for littles, or for our K-12, yeah. So for us, really think about, how is this assisting you? Or for my class, I'm teaching them how to apply it, right? Because I teach the technology class. So that's what it looks like. That's what substitution is for. The second step, and this gets a little bit grainy, augmentation and modification are in the middle. Augmentation and modification, there's kind of a blurred line there. Katie's going to talk about that in a minute. It's hard to tell really where the difference is. Augmentation, if we think about our coffee example, it adds a little bit something extra to what you would have done before. It's different because it's not the straight same. Adds a little bit of something different, like a latte instead of my cup of coffee. It's a direct substitute. It's not the substitute. It's got a little bit of improvement. We're going to do a spark today. We're going to do just the post. For example, if you're doing a book review, which Katie's going to talk about, that spark that you're going to make, that might be, you're going to use that technology to make it a little bit different. Instead of just using a book review that you might have written, maybe I use an Instagram spark. That's a substitute with that's a modification or an augmentation with my technology, with my Instagram spark. Do I need it? Is it beneficial? When you see your post, I think you'll love it because you can add pictures to it. It really brightens it up. They can really get involved and really think about their learning. But you've got to decide, do I want that augmentation? Has it really added to their learning? Katie and I love it. I love doing the post. Do you want to take that time out of your lesson to really do that? That's the augmentation. Then the modification. This allows for a significant redesign. It really changes the way the class competes the project. It adds options that could not have been available before. So now you've gone to the iced macchiato. You're really adding to it. You're really adding something beefy there. For my class, we do a portfolio. We do a web page. Back in my day, you had the 2-inch binder, and you added all of your stuff. I think I've still got my binder somewhere. But now Adobe Spark, it allows us to, it's a beautiful web page. It's got these running pieces on the sides, and it's beautiful. And they can, even in my class, we do an old school web page where you click and click and click, and it kind of all lines up. But Adobe Spark allows us to do these web pages that you add all these pieces and parts, and they're moving. It's a complete redesign. So the SAMR model says that you've modified it. It's something that you couldn't have ever done before. You really redesigned it. So that's what that M stands for. Redefinition is completely different. So redefinition, you do a completely new task. You've never done anything like it before. And in the elementary school classroom, they do a really cool thing called Mystery Skype. Has anybody seen Mystery Skype before? It's amazing. So children now, they're on Twitter. You can do on Twitter, Facebook, whatever. But teachers, they get on Mystery Skype, and this is how they're learning geography. So they get in touch with other teachers somewhere across the world. Sometimes they do it in the world, it depends on how old the kids are. Sometimes it's just in the United States, and their goal is to learn about all of the states in the whole United States by the end of the year. And they connect across Mystery Skype, they hashtag Mystery Skype, and they connect with teachers somewhere in the United States, and they teach their kids how to ask. They can only ask yes or no questions. That's all they can ask, and they begin to question, where are you? Are you on the East Coast? The West Coast? Do you have a river in your state? Do you have mountains in your state? And they're using Google Maps to figure out where they are. Instead of pen pals, where it would have been, now they're using Mystery Skype, and that's how they learn the geography of the United States. It's so cool. But they completely redefined what pen pals would have been back in the day. Now they're Mystery Skyping, and that's how they're learning their geography lessons. It's so cool and so neat. So that's what the SAMR model looks like just in practice. You can see here, I told you a minute ago, it's kind of lined up with Bloom's. Schrock talks about it, she's looked at it this way. So you have your lower, just the enhancements of your lessons, and then you completely transformed here That was Pudahara's idea. And then she kind of went in this way and said, okay, Bloom's the remembering here. Then like we talked about, these can get crossed here a little bit, the understanding, applying, analyzing, and then all the way up to really evaluating and creating type lessons here. It really beefs up your lesson. Then you have this called the pedagogy wheel. I put that in there so you could see it up front. That's why I really wanted to do this in a Nearpod so you could really see it. The pedagogy wheel, it gets updated quite often. So if you want to stay on that, if this is something you're interested in and you really like it, if you want to keep updating and look up that pedagogy wheel, anytime you, all those things get re-updated and new apps, the pedagogy wheel gets re-updated because obviously our apps are changing all the time. And this brings everything in together.
So we're noticing it says pedagogy is on the left, embedded. So that's interesting. So is it because it's iPad?
Yeah, he calls it pedagogy.
Because these look like
iPad apps. Mm-hmm. So what this is, they've gone in and they've done Bloom's this end, all your verbs, your action verbs you can see here, and then you've got the SAMR model on this outside rim, and then they've gone in and done all of the apps that everything links to in the middle. It's very cool. When you're teaching this, or you're trying to think for yourself, how would I use this in my classroom? Where do these things link up? So you see the Adobe things, they kind of run right in here. But then things like Word or Twitter, because you're just doing that straight tweet, it's gonna run right in here. And then some of Guitar Hero is back here in redefinition. It's very cool and very neat to kind of think about, take some of that guesswork out because it's hard to think about, okay, where would I put, what do I have, what can I use? And for me, sometimes making those objectives and thinking about what verb do I want to use, where do I want to be on that continuum, the wheel kind of puts everything together and lets you really think about that. So that's what I wanted you to be able to see that and how all those things kind of link together. And let your kid, let your students see it and where, sometimes our students struggle putting the technology piece in there. So if you've got one of your student teachers or your res ones trying to fit that technology piece in, mine always come in with a notepad or a poster, and it would have been so easy just to put it up on the screen rather than, I watched the lesson this morning and it was great. It was fantastic. And then she got to her middle piece, and instead of putting it up on a screen for them to look at and do it together as small groups, she had this little bitty poster that she just came and put up there. And I thought, that would have been so easy to just use a little bit of technology piece. They just don't think of it, which is okay. So, questions about the SAMR model before I keep moving? Did that make sense?
So if you had like an example of a paper that you'd have in a traditional university classroom, would a substitution be just submitting the paper online as opposed to handing it in physical form?
So a substitution, because you've already written the paper to paper. So substitution, you're wanting to do something completely different. Maybe do it in a blog or or maybe do it as a tweet. What this model is looking at, how can you change the assignment itself? Somehow do it in pages or do it in, does that make sense?
Yeah, I was just thinking of the coffee to coffee.
I think it would be like maybe the like you said, like linking the paper to a tweet.
Yes. So
Maybe because it's still the paper.
It's still the paper. You're still writing the paper, but you're doing it. It's still the paper, but it's not.
Or the blog, I think.
Yeah.
in the same format.
Yeah, it's still the same format. You're still writing. Does that make sense? SAMR is really hard to think about how to do it and how to do. It doesn't seem like it's hard. Then when you really think about, okay, what do I assign really, and how can I change that? How can I reimagine this assignment and make this
Well, when
a tech piece.
As a science teacher, I would have my students keep science, what I called scientist notebooks, and they were composition books where they would record things, and then I would collect those and take them home. And so I could substitute them, writing them in this journal into maybe a Google form or an electronic format that then would, for my purposes, allow me easier accessibility, but also potentially thinking for them, it might be easier for them to type than it is for them.
And I'm thinking like for books too, like this is, the original book, and then they're, putting it on, pulling it up on the Kindle reader.
Right.
It's still the same book, same pictures. I'm not changing the assignment, but I'm putting it up there for everyone to have more access to. So it'd be, and it may make a little more sense too, and I do mine because I'll kind of show you how I kind of started, this is my first time to hear all this too, so I've been trying to reflect on where my assignment was and how it's kind of like you kind of move in and out on, in and out not only of the model, but through the model as you're trying to figure out what's the best format. And I'll kind of show you how I did that with the Instagram and how it still needs to be made better or is it worth it kind of thing.
Yeah, because there's always a learning curve, right?
Yeah.
The time that it takes. But I think too that as a in the college classroom working with pre-service teachers, I probably do more substituting than at the higher levels, and I need to move to those higher levels. So instead of pre-assessing on a 3x5 card, tell me what you know about. I can do it in an electronic format that gives me immediate access, or I can make a Kahoot and sort of poll and whatnot. So it's a way of changing out one for another.
Right, and that was something that we did, the tell me what you know about, rather than do it on a card, do it on a flip grid, which is, that's a little bit different, still very fast, but it's easily accessible.
And I would say that's moving a little up from substitution though with Flipgrid, because you enter into the social media aspect of things, which that moves it up because there's the interaction of the outer world and all that.
Right, and when we think about assessing, before we would have done a handwritten assessment, just a quiz written down. Well, now one of the things that I learned that I didn't know about before, we had the Murfreesboro City Schools guys come and talk to us, and they'd showed us, I had seen Quizlet, which is the little app that you can use for them to review, but he showed us Quizzes, and that was different. When they got up and moved around as a group, so they could model their learning as a group, and it came up with a cool animal, and I could do as a group. So it was completely different. So new assessments. So not just thinking about assignments, but assessments as well to allow students to model their learning also moves us up on this model as well. So it's a whole new way of thinking. It takes a little time, like you said, to think about, okay, where am I? We'll all start on the lower end first and then begin to think about how to move up that model. So papers are a little hard because they already typed them, but then think about other assignments that maybe we have in our classrooms to kind of move up that model. It's very cool. So today we're going to show you an Adobe Spark, the first thing. Adobe Spark comes in three things, and we'll talk about how we can really apply these things to the classroom. When you look at Adobe Spark, it has a graphic or a post. On Instagram, I know my daughter, she looks at these beautiful graphics, and it's a picture on the back, and it has all of these beautiful sayings, and I loved it. They come out of Adobe Spark. You can make them there, and they can be squares or longs or circles or whatever, but you can do those there, and Katie's going to show you how to apply that at the end, what you can use in your classroom. You can also make a web page. Like I said earlier, we use portfolios in our with our university students, and Adobe Spark makes a beautiful web page, how they can present themselves, how they can present themselves to a principal. They can put all those things together in the web pages. And then the last thing they do is videos. I know we ask our university, our Res 1s, they have to video themselves. They have to clip them when they do TPA, but it allows them to look at themselves, allows them to look at themselves when they're teaching. So they can do all those things in the videos, and that's what all those, we can use all those, I don't know what everyone else does if they do any videoing, but Adobe Spark does all of those things. Okay? So I'm going to show you how to do that. And I'm just going to show you the step-by-step. So if you want to log in to Adobe Spark, once you're there, you're just going to press the button that says Get Started Now, and then wait.
And then we're going to click.
It'll ask you this: Welcome to Spark. What would you like to create? Did you find it there? All right. Okay. And then scroll all the way down to the bottom, and you'll see this. Select Create a Graphic. Just scroll all the way down to the very bottom.
So those are all examples and templates?
Yes. And you can spend hours there. You can look at all those templates. You can look at all those things. You could spend forever. Yes. So I thought, well, since we're here today and our time was limited, I just thought we'll just focus on just this one thing so we don't get sidetracked. So if you want to click on that Create a Graphic and hit Start from Scratch. Okay. And then if you want to click a square, and then hit Next. And then pick whatever picture you like.
Whatever talks to me.
Whatever speaks to you. Now if you look at that, at this right-hand side, you can see that this plus button, it allows you to change the text, the icons. If you upgrade, you can change that Adobe Spark logo, which doesn't matter to me. You can add photos. Here you can change the design. You can change colors. You can change the layout. You can do all kinds of stuff. So I'm gonna let you spend a little time looking at it and playing with it.
Does it show, can you put in like bullet points and stuff like you can with words, or is it all pictures?
So this one, that one that she's looking at is set to music.
Yeah.
And they did the video piece. So then when you're finished, you can share it. You have several options. You can do it Facebook, Twitter, the Google Classroom, email, or send the link. And that's what my students did. They linked it and sent it to me. And that was what they had to do. It was really neat. Again, moving up that model, something they couldn't have done before. Because a lot of our students, they don't have time to teach. They don't have the experience to teach a lesson yet. But they can, they can do a PowerPoint presentation, but they don't quite have the knowledge just yet to do a full lesson, or they're just not quite there yet. So this helps them get started to do some sort of a little bit of a lesson, and they can use this model. Questions on that so far?
That's cool.
It's neat. It's really neat. It's a different kind of a tool. Like I said, it's similar to a Sway. If you haven't used a Sway, it's similar to a Sway. Sway's a little bit harder to use, I think, because you're coming down those slides, and the slides aren't. When you use the Sway, sometimes the text is a little bit small and doesn't really go in all the spots like you want it to. And I really liked this.
But you can put words on it. And stuff.
Okay.
Absolutely, you can put text on it. Yep. Absolutely.
You could do this on your Twitter account. I know you have more than one, right? And I'm thinking motivational kind of stuff with fun pictures and sayings. And
I wanted you to see the post today because that was the shortest. I didn't want to take all our time with you guys doing anything more than just the post, but the post was the easiest. But you can.
So where do you get to that share thing?
Once you hit the end, the share is on the very top. Here's the share. Click the share. It'll take you out to Facebook, to Twitter. If you've got a Google Classroom, it'll take you to a Google Classroom. You can link it, and that's what my students do. They send me a link.
awesome.
It's very fun.
So now we got to take time and play with it and
play
practice
with it. That's
it.
right. I wanted to give you the tools
To get in.
to get in and to know what to do step by step. And now Katie's going to come up and show how she uses it in her classroom, or how she uses the Instagram posts in her classroom.
So I'll say I'm one of the last people I would expect to be doing a technology lunch and learn. And so Yeah, so this is good for me, though, to do some reflecting on my own practice, but also kind of model that for you guys. So if you have some practice that you're thinking about moving up the model, this was kind of my process, I guess, even though I didn't know there was a model before. And so now it's helping me kind of define what I'm doing and realize when I'm going in and out and what's the best way to do it, and where I still need to kind of think about the worth of it in terms of being a practice. So I kind of, once Stacy taught me about the model, I kind of sat down and thought about the main thing that I have been doing in my class is using, is I've began to use Instagram and Goodreads and Amazon. So I'm a literacy person, so you're going to hear a lot about literacy in this little section of, so how do I make, because I'm very much a still go by the book kind of person, and I love picture books. I love having them in my hands, and I love reading all of that. So how do we integrate technology into that besides just, getting an ebook? And so I kind of landed myself between augmentation and modification with this. It's definitely beyond substitution, and now that I've seen that pedagogy, whatever thing, wheel, and you see Facebook into modification. And so it's social media, it's definitely beyond substitution, because we're engaging in this outer world of things, and now it's the way that people hear news and socially interact. And if you've spent any time on Instagram, you've seen the way, people make livings off of being having followers on Instagram, and they curate their feeds. And in fact, photographers are now making money off of presets, because there's a thing called Instagram flow, where you want everything to flow and look a certain way. So it's almost like artwork. Okay, so there's this whole, I'm gonna use in the literacy term, it's like transliteracy, where I'm going in and out of ways of making meaning. So it could be pictures, it could be words, icons, like the way I set it up. I'm in a book, I'm responding to a book through a picture, writing it on social media and discussing. So you can see that's why it's called transliteracy. I'm going in and out of all these different ways of making meaning. So I would say I'm somewhere right here, because it's not completely redefined yet, and you'll see why, because I go back to my paper. But I also use some of the ideas, like hashtags. Hashtags are a new thing with the creation and popularization of social media. So how can we use hashtags kind of down the model a little bit with young kids in literacy? So there we go. All right, so my guiding questions for myself when I was creating this project was, what practical methods help teachers, both pre-service and serving teachers, provide access and exposure to books with diverse and critical themes? What practical methods help teachers and students talk more about what they are reading? And what practical methods help students become avid readers who read and talk about books that disrupt the single story, and that's a whole nother thing, and create windows and mirrors? So I'm hoping that they will, how do I get them to read and talk about books that they normally wouldn't read and talk about, is pretty much what, especially after hearing some students in my Read 4015 classes say they've never read a book from cover to cover when they come into my class. And so how do I get them excited? And I know the one thing that they are excited about, most of them, is social media. I hardly meet a college student anymore that's not on social media. And many of them curate a feed in the way that I'm talking about. So that was where my friend is a high school teacher, and she felt the same way. That's where we came up with the idea. Maybe we need to bring this to social media. So the literature behind this, I won't go into this because I know this is more literacy based, but we want motivation is a huge factor now in all learning, but so how do we get them motivated? How do we get them talking when they don't usually talk face to face as much anymore? How do we get them talking? And how do we advertise, if you will, being a literacy person and make it cool or make it relevant to them? And then we have this whole digital literacy and this transliteracy piece that's becoming very popular. In the 21st century, what does it look like to be literate? And so that's kind of the literature review behind that. So here's the Instagram assignment we created. And I linked a live binder at the end of this with all these. If you would like to have these rubrics for some reason, you can, they are linked on there. So here's the assignment. Pretty much what it is they are creating a post for Instagram about a book that they have read. And they're curating it in the way inspired by, again, if you don't have a background for this, it may not make any sense, but if you've ever followed like a fashion blogger or a food blogger or something like that, they're posting like, my dinner is, you know, here's the pie and here's the cup of coffee and a flower and whatever. And that's like, it's a beautiful picture of the pie that they've posted and then linked the recipe, you know, so that's that same with clothes. It's, they put the clothes out or they stand in a certain way and then they link where you can buy the clothes and then they end up making money off of it, all this stuff. So it's kind of inspired by that. So I'll show you one just to talk through the rubric. So I have a few ones that I wanted to bring out. So this one, created by MTSU students, was for the book I Am Malala. I think some of my capitalization got messed up in the move over to a different one. But so what they have to do is they have to have the book view. You know, you have to see the book. So they have theirs right here, I Am Malala, and the title of the book. They have to have a quote from the book presented in any way. So they could use Adobe Spark to put it in, or they could handwrite it, whatever. And then they have to have artifacts, at least 2 artifacts that represent the book as a whole. And then they curate the photograph. They write a review, and then they pose a question. So it's almost like Socratic seminar, where you come to the seminar with a question, but now we're online, okay? And so there's kind of all these different things that they're doing. They're curating the photograph. They're being artistic, but they're distilling information, you know, from the book. They're advertising their book, but then they're posing the question. So it's becoming, and then they hashtag. They have 3 hashtags and then they emoji, you know, things that come up. Okay, so they review the book, which, and ask the question, and then they respond. So here's one response I just pulled out from here. This book sounds so amazing and interesting. I'm definitely putting it on my summer reading list. I love how it makes you realize the value of education more deeply, because I know I take my education for granted every day, and I'm going to try not to do that anymore. Malala sounds like an extremely strong-willed woman who perseveres through the unimaginable. She sounds very inspiring. I look forward to reading this soon. So you'll see some interaction, you know, between them that sometimes you're not seeing in class. I still feel like I can beef up the interaction online, but the account is growing where other people are seeing. So the advertisement aspect of it is happening, where they're getting inspired or access and exposure. The Socratic discussion part is still in the air. And so when I'm reflecting on the model, I decided to add in, based off of yours, Dr. Calkin, Flipgrid, which is kind of similar to Instagram stories. And so I'm gonna see if that helps with the Socratic piece, where they're really engaging in conversation that they wouldn't normally engage in class. And so we're gonna see how that goes. I have a few to show you. And then, all right, here's another one. The other Westmore. Again, I loved this one. First of all, they curated this in class. One of them did, and somebody brought all that money to class, and I was like, oh my gosh. She pulled out like this wad of all these $20 bills. I was like, wow. But they had I just thought it was a really powerful post the way, and you can just see, like, I don't tell them that it has to look like a certain way. I just give them the rubric, but they care about the way that they curate it. And Stacy kind of confirmed that. She has the teenagers in her house too. Like, she watched her daughter, like, okay, put this out here. Now take it a certain way in a certain backdrop. And it's like, they really care about that, you know, the way they present something online. And so you can see how carefully curated it is. And then there's some more comments back and forth. The hate you give. Here's another one. That was so powerful. And so you can see the transliteracy aspect coming in here too. So they bring in like new school, old school, real versus fiction. So in here on the hate you give, they have, you know, the artifacts from the book. But here they've brought in some real life, and they list so if you don't know what The Hate You Give is about, it's a fictional story of an African-American teenager being killed by a white police officer. So that's the fictional story, but here they list all the names of real people who have been shot by a white police officer, you know, and so they're just bringing in this meaning. And I love this one was one of my favorite comments. This book seems so interesting to me, and I feel like I can relate. Being a Salvadorian American, sometimes I struggle to fit in both worlds. Just like Star, I feel different no matter where I am because I worry that I won't live up to expectations. I feel like I'm not Hispanic enough or I'm not American enough. It can be hard, but at the same time, I'm happy to get the experience and be part of both sides. And this was definitely, I know who the student is who commented on this, and she was very quiet in class, like never said a word in class, but then she wrote this online. And so it's kind of, again, I go back and forth between what's the best way, but you can tell they care about these posts a lot. All right.
So they're posting these in Instagram, but they can curate their photo. They can do that in Spark or whichever format they choose.
Yes, yeah. So a lot of them have been, you know, bringing their artifacts together and taking a picture, like you know, and but I'll show you another account that we're running that's mostly using just Adobe.
It's a whole other way to engage them.
Yes. And it's basically, it is a book review that they're doing. So they have a lot of literacy content that they're hitting. They have to summarize a book, which is a standard. They have to, or they're advertising the book, talking about the book, and they are distilling information, which is a standard too. They're distilling it through the artifacts and the picture, but then also the hashtags. And I've found that hashtagging little sections, which we're gonna do one, has been so effective for my students, even in college class. And we're gonna play with making like a little book or a poem out of the hashtags that we're coming up with in this one class. One class we're reading The Book Thief, and one class we're reading The Hate You Give, and the hashtags are just incredible.
So do you have them create, so they probably have their own Instagram account. Are they using their personal, or are they creating a school Instagram?
Yeah, so I have created one that they upload to, and so it's called Not a Single Story. But I've had other teachers who have taken this assignment idea and they create their own.
So it's a class Instagram, basically.
Yeah, and I go back and forth again between that too, because and if you're teaching like young kids, you can just have the password and post everybody's, you know, it's not gonna be that much. But for college, I can't really keep up with everybody's like posting. It's too much for me to post all of them. So I've given them the password and and I haven't had a problem, but we did have one high school student, because my friend is also using it and she teaches high school, who went through and followed all the Real Housewives of New York's on it. Like, so I went in there and it was like, Not a Single Story is now following, and it was like all these Real Housewives of New York. And so I had to change the password, and then they figured out who it was. But that was the only thing. So I haven't had any problems, you know. Yeah, it could be worse. I was like, that's actually kind of funny. But we've now tried, so had only done it with college students and now tried to bring it down to 4th grade. I had a college student who did it with her 4th graders, and they did it as a small group. So like the literature circle together created that, but they did this wild robot by themselves, and they created that little robot out of Legos. So it's transliteracy. They're creating, they're and they came up with the most important quote and all of that. So, and then this was a 7th grader, and they used the Adobe because they put in the quotes like that. And then this was a 11th grader right there. And that was one of our first ones. And it just confirmed to me, because it was so beautiful. I was like, you can just tell how much they care about it. So we've adapted it where it can go down to young kids. And then this last one I want to show you with the transliteracy. So the ability to read, write, and interact across a range of platforms. And I will say, it's a range of platforms, so we don't have to go away from some tried and true things, or holding a book or writing with a pencil. We don't have to go away from that, but what our students are going to have to do is be able to move in and out of all of it. And so that's where I think this is helpful. Write and interact across a range of platforms, tools and media, from signing and orality, through handwriting, print, TV, radio, film, and digital social networks. This comes from the library definition. They're the ones who really have been the forefront, library researchers, forefront of this transliteracy, and that's why you're seeing maker spaces popping up. We have one in our library. And it's the way, how can I be literate in all of these ways? Going in and out with literacy in all these different ways. So I had a student this semester, and she writes about her process too, but she did a picture book. And it's about, and I don't know how to say his name, I should have figured that out before. He's a famous, I know his art, Jean-Michel Basquiat, something like that. And it's a picture book about him called Radiant Child. And then she painted hers. So she painted on a big poster board her different things, then took a picture of it and posted it. So that was like true transliteracy right there. So she used all kinds of platforms. She distilled the information. She used physical painting. She took a photo. She posted it to social media. She wrote the review. And so I thought that was really cool. And so I won't read all of these, but these are quotes from my students about it. And one of the best ones for me was that this was the first book that they read from front to back. And they were really excited to talk about it on social media and share it. And my biggest compliment is when they share it to my page, but then they share it to their own. And so that means they really cared enough. They want other people to see it. And then they said, this solidified my learning. And yeah, so they're distilling information, making meaning across platforms, then discussing, and then they're engaged. So here's the hashtag part. So this is where I kind of like backed out of the model a little bit in using hashtags for a section of a book almost as an assessment. And so I'm trying to figure out how I can, move this up and down, or maybe it doesn't need to be moved up and down. But the idea of a hashtag is that it distills a bunch of information into like a few words. Okay, and so had y'all know about the book Thief?
Yes.
Okay, so the book Thief is set in World War II, if you don't know. And so here's some of my favorite hashtags that they came up with. So what we would do is at each section that we stopped at, so if you had a lit circle going on, they would hashtag that section. So in this section, what's the big thing, or what could I take away? And they said hashtag escalating, hashtag kids in the hood, which was one of my favorite ones, because he said that the kids, in Nazi Germany were just kids like any other kids, and they were being mischievous and all sorts of things while all of this is going around, and he just said, it just reminded him like, kids are kids. And it was like he was talking about his growing up in the hood and kids are kids, and then some of them end up growing up in war. And but you're still going to see a kid in a war-torn country or playing with a soccer ball or like making their own soccer ball. Anyway, Death You Will, Burning Down the House, which I thought was an awesome one. Again, transliteracy, they're taking from a song and then they're relating it to the book, and then they're distilling information. Death You Old Soul, Will Reading Save Your Life, Choice German Words, and then another transliteracy. This is from a movie. It's called, I can't even say it. It's like Stoiki Mojkvich or something, Musvik or something like that. And it means steadfast man in German. And there's a part where one of the characters is like getting beat down by life pretty much, but he keeps standing up, keeps standing up, keeps standing up. And they did that from a movie and brought it here and related it here. And then same with The Hate You Give. The hashtag We Can't Breathe is actually a real hashtag for one, if you know about, I don't know the name, but one of the police killings, he was saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And they never stopped, and then he died. And so the hashtag for his movement was We Can't Breathe. And so they brought that into this. So again, they're just crossing all. So here's how you can bring it to younger kids. And again, this is where I back out of the model and need to figure out a way to come up. I have the kids like self-evaluating, and then here is my reading conferences with them, and they hashtag their section, and that's where we start our conference. So if whatever section they've read, so they plan out through the week what they're going to read, and then they hashtag, and that's how I come up beside them for a reading conference. Okay, let's start with your hashtag. Why did you write that hashtag? It's very engaging for them, and it gives them a place to start talking, and then you can tell if they've read or not. So I don't know how to, I think this is a great one, and I'm trying to figure out how to make it a little more, up the model. So this.
And then the question, is it always necessary? Does
Yeah.
it, and it may not be, but if it adds value or
Right.
it makes life easier, right?
Right. And then now we're going to get into using Amazon and Goodreads. So those entities, worlds, they're almost like worlds in and of themselves, to all do the same thing again. How do we expose students, teachers, to literature they may not have read and the discussions that are going around them. So my personal New Year's resolution was a true literacy nerd fashion to be active on Goodreads. And it's been awesome because I've posted, the books that I'm reading, and then I can remember the books that I've read over the year when people ask, like, what book should I read? And you don't know. But so I've been getting my students also to get on Goodreads or Amazon and start exploring. So this is kind of like the setup. Can you get on there and explore? So I did this one for middle school. It was only 4. I wanted them to find a book with a catchy cover, a book out of their comfort zone, an award winner, and then a book that uses multimedia. There's a book called Skeleton Creek that has QR codes in it, and it brings them out to these almost like Blair Witch Project videos, which is really cool. So it's something like that. This one was for older and my college students. I wanted the same thing. Award-winning books, a book with an author or a character that identifies as LGBTQI, the book, a banned book, a book that's been turned into a movie, graphic novel. And so they're just exploring in there. And then they had to write their own book reviews, okay, on the social media, or I mean on the Goodreads or Amazon platform. And so here's two that I brought out from my students. This one's a positive one where they're like, this is the best book ever. And they have to do the same thing. They kind of evaluate the book, but they also give a summary of the book. And then this one was like hilarious because they gave it a 2 because the book is about becoming a hero. And it's called I think it's called How to Be a Hero. And the kid the whole time, you think that the kid is going to finally get his chance to be a hero, and a mom slips and has a baby, and the baby's falling. You think that the boy's gonna catch the baby, and then someone else comes in and he wins a prize at the store for being whatever X number customer, and then he's like, I guess I am a hero because I won this prize. It's the weirdest book of all time. And my students were so fired up about how awful it was. And so they put on there, and then they were pulling out all the bad reviews. And it was so funny. That's a thing too, reading Amazon reviews or reading bad reviews and things. So but both sides. So they said, one of the best quotes that I got from reflecting on this, I felt like I became a part of a book community I never knew existed. And so they realized teachers and things people are out there. Again, there are people who make livings off of being Goodreads book reviewers. One of them's name is Emily May because she always comes up. She's the one, they get sent books in her review, so this is a whole new place for them. All right, so that's Goodreads and Amazon. All right, so, and then just to show you more on the Adobe Spark, this is Love at First Line Instagram, and it uses that. And what we do is just post books we love in the first line from it, and it's, again, same thing. It's curating a community. Right now, the teachers have just been doing it, but it's an easy one to get kids doing. Or it doesn't even have to be first line. It could be, just a great line from the book that would get them interested in reading. But you can see how students start to follow this, and you can see them being inspired by, and it says, someone commented, currently reading this, and it's the trailer looked terrifying. This is from The Handmaid's Tale. I'm currently reading, haven't quite finished yet, but I think it will be on my favorites list. Can't wait to watch. Someone else also currently reading, what do you think? And then someone said, oh my gosh, I need closure. I need a sequel, because if you've read The Handmaid's Tale, it doesn't end where you understand anything. So so you can see them interacting pretty good on that one. Back and forth, and the advertisement of, I'm currently reading, should I read this one? And same thing with the next, where this is from Speak, same thing, using Adobe Spark, and someone asks, curious if you've read Eleanor and Park, which is another, so they're using it as another place to ask for recommendations for books. And my friend comments back, well, I read Eleanor and Park a few years ago and hated it. I'm definitely in the minority though. Have you read it? And then someone's like, yes, and then someone comes back in and says, I'm glad I wasn't the only one who hated it. So they're kind of in and out.
So this is your class Instagram, or this is Twitter?
This is this is Instagram too. This is a different one. This is me and my high school teacher friend run both of these. And so what I'm showing you right now is Love at First Line Instagram. The other one is not a single story. So it's just another one. But yeah, it's the same.
It's the name of your Instagram.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yeah, I think, let me see if I have anything. Okay. So when I was talking to you about, am I doing enough engagement with the Socratic seminar part, I just implemented the flip grid. So I think there's only one up there, but there is one good one that I want you, if you pull up there, if it'll let you pull it up. I tried it on my phone. Yeah, that's it. There's the live binder. Resources for all the literacy stuff. I know not everybody's literacy in here, but if you're interested.
Some of us are literacy and forgive me, I don't want to say we don't want to be, but
Well,
yeah.
so I have a question. Are you ready for questions? Suppose that you are a teacher candidate and you are in physical education and your charge is to incorporate literacy as part of the new literacy push in K-12. How would you do that with something like this?
That's a good question that I might need to think on for a minute, but this is a random side note, but one of my students actually just created a text set, and I don't know if I don't think she's a master's student, so, but she created a text set that she titled Let's Get Moving, and it was basically all books that encourage kids to be active, and it was a really great, I had never seen, most of my students are choosing like a text set on apples or something like that, so this one was cool, it was different, and she had books about the first women basketball players and books about, and it was just like all these different things to get kids moving. So that was just off the top of my head. There are a lot of ways in terms of, books, but then have you heard of Go Noodle? Go Noodle is like, it's kind of actually gotten a little out of control, but because a lot of teachers use it. I think they fall back on it sometimes to like fill time, but it's based here in Nashville, and it's a bunch of videos, but a lot of them are to get kids active. And so I could imagine them like creating their own Go Noodle video, and some of them are, I'm thinking about mindfulness. I've done a whole thing on literacy and mindfulness. So I don't know if they could post some sort of mindful thought or, some sort, because I would guess that would be like a physical education thing. I don't know, like yoga kind of. So they have that on Go Noodle as well. And they just have like active videos where and some of it is, some of it's like they do like a dance move, and it replace, like if you have to do indoor recess and stuff like that, it gets them moving. But then some of it's like attached to a learning thing. And then some of it's like, you know more than me, I'm gonna embarrass myself, but the crossbody thing where the kids have to learn to cross over their midline when they're little. I could imagine like a student coming up with some sort of fun way to get kids doing like crossing the midline and stuff like that. So you can do videos on these things, which I think would be one way that you incorporate movement. I would encourage you to look at, there's food Instagram people, there's fashion Instagram people, and then there's fitness Instagram people. I would probably look at a lot of those Instagrams to be inspired. Maybe they could come up, that would actually be the idea right there. Is like they usually post, like 3 photos in a row of them doing some like, movement or something, like here's the 3 movements of the day, do these for 20 seconds, like, and they curate, 3 photos, or do a, what is it called, where a boomerang, you know what a boomerang is? A boomerang is like 2 seconds of a movement. So it's not quite a picture, and it's not quite a video. And so a lot, like you could do this in a boomerang and it would just keep going over and over again like that. So they could do boomerangs on Instagram easily with a movement, or I think that could be really cool. You could have them, here I am, I'm just talking, so tell me when to stop, but you could have them. So I'm thinking about like, in my writing class, we start with a community building, and they have to lead the community building activity, and it could be that they have a due date, and they have, for the first 3 minutes of class, they show their little exercises of the day, or their mindfulness thing, or whatever. I don't know. Yeah. Just ideas.
Those are ways that we can use to teach our subject area folks to use literacy.
Yeah, the literacy standards for us in secondary involve both content specific and disciplinary specific.
Okay, yeah.
So what is how do physical educators or historians or scientists or
Yes.
what have you, how do they, what is their methods for discourse and syntax, and how does that all look? And so they have to be able to demonstrate their own ability and then demonstrate their ability to teach students in the field to those things. And so, and so we're tasked with, in particular with the field experiences, how we can help them think about that.
Yeah.
And
The tech sets are a big thing in literacy right now with how, and it makes it multimodal. How can you represent a theme, or an idea with a tech set, and the tech set can be a children's book, a chapter book, a graphic novel, or it can be a picture or a video or a poem, a text. And so if, rather than just having one book on a theme, they have all these different ways of looking at it. It could be, from a newspaper article. So I could easily see them, curating a tech set on a certain topic, that makes, and again, like being clear that a tech set is not just books like this, but so the way that I did my assignment was they had to have one video, one other thing, a poem, relate it to like a current event, things like that. So
no, those are all great ideas. Great ideas. Wonderful. Any other questions?
are you science at all?
Yes, I'm
She
science.
is.
So one thing that we're doing with the makerspace stuff is at elementary school. So I don't know, it would be, you could move it up to high school, but they're creating their own books, but they like make their own characters, and then they've also been like coding, so they can move their little, they're using the makerspace things to make books.
Yes.
Yeah. And so that's been fun. Yeah.
Are they using Pages to make the books?
We have not got that far yet because they're just making their animals right now. I'm trying to figure that out.
So Pages is a good tool for bookmaking.
Do they take the picture and then put it in, or how do they?
Yeah, you can do that, or you can select from like gallery, and you can curate pages.
Yeah, because they're gonna have to take pictures, I think, of their
and improvise.
Okay. Yeah. So MTCS, the Christian school, elementary school got a makerspace. So that's what it's really awesome too. It ain't no little makerspace. It's got a lot of stuff in it. Yeah.